My husband sneered, "Buy your own food and stop living off me." I said nothing, but my silent revenge left him absolutely ruined. My husband looked me dead in the eye, smirked like he had just checkmated me in a game I didn't even know we were playing, and sneered, "If you want to keep living under my roof, you need to start paying rent, buy your own food, and stop living off me like a parasite." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the ceramic coffee mug I was currently washing straight at his head, even though my hand twitched with the urge to do so. Instead, I carefully turned off the faucet, dried my hands on a kitchen towel, looked right back at him, and said absolutely nothing. I just nodded, walked out of the kitchen, and quietly shut the door to our bedroom. That silence? That was the sound of my marriage ending. It was also the starting gun for the most meticulously planned, flawlessly executed exit strategy of my entire life. If he wanted a roommate instead of a wife, I was about to give him the most ruthlessly corporate roommate experience he could ever imagine. To understand how we got to this point, you need a little bit of context. My husband, let's call him David, is 32, and I am 29. We had been married for 4 years, together for 7. When we first met, David was sweet, ambitious, and seemingly grounded. He had bought a modest 3-bedroom house just a year before we got married. Because his name was on the deed and he paid the mortgage, he insisted on an ironclad prenuptial agreement that stated the house would remain entirely his in the event of a divorce, and that our finances would remain separate. At the time, I was young, blindly in love, and proudly independent, so I happily signed it. I didn't want him to think I was after his assets. I had my own career in digital marketing, and I fully believed in pulling my own weight. But our financial arrangement was heavily skewed from the very beginning, in a way David conveniently chose to ignore. Yes, David paid the $1,800 monthly mortgage. That was his grand contribution to our household. I, on the other hand, paid for literally everything else. I paid the electric, water, and gas bills. I paid for our gigabit internet. I paid for the Hulu, Netflix, HBO, and Amazon Prime subscriptions. I bought 100% of the groceries, which easily amounted to $600 to $800 a month because David insisted on high-quality steaks, organic chicken, and expensive craft beers. I paid for the deep cleaning of the house once a month. When the washing machine broke, I bought the new one. When the living room looked bare, I financed the $3,000 sectional sofa, the 75-inch smart TV, and the surround sound system. Beyond the financial imbalance, I was doing all the domestic labor. I did his laundry, folded his boxers, cooked dinner every single night, packed his lunches for work so he could save money, and managed our entire social calendar. By all metrics, I was subsidizing his lifestyle. Because I absorbed all the invisible costs of living, David had a massive amount of disposable income. Recently, David had received a promotion at his corporate finance job, bumping his salary up to about $110,000 a year. Meanwhile, I was working fully remote as a senior marketing consultant. What David didn't know, because he never bothered to ask about my career anymore, was that my consultancy had blown up over the past 6 months. I had recently signed 2 major tech clients that effectively doubled my income. I was on track to clear $140,000 this year. But because I work in sweatpants from my home office, David still viewed my job as cute and easy. David's promotion had inflated his ego to unbearable proportions. He started coming home late, talking down to me, and acting like he was a Wolf of Wall Street titan who had graced me with his presence. The inciting incident happened on a random Tuesday. David had been invited to a luxury golf weekend in Miami by his new executives. He wanted to buy a set of custom Callaway golf clubs that cost upwards of $2,500. When he checked his personal checking account, he realized he didn't have enough liquid cash to casually drop on the clubs because he had recently blown his money on a massive tattoo sleeve and a new gaming PC. Instead of taking responsibility for his terrible spending habits, he decided it was my fault. He stormed into the kitchen while I was cleaning up after the dinner I had cooked for him and demanded to know why we were always so broke. I calmly reminded him that we weren't broke and that our finances were completely separate. That's when he snapped. He went on a 15-minute tirade about how he carries the ultimate financial burden because he pays the mortgage. He told me I was living in his house essentially for free. He claimed that because I work from home, I was draining the electricity and running up the bills that I paid. He worked himself into a frenzy, pacing around the kitchen island, inflating his chest, and then he dropped the ultimatum that changed everything. "I'm done subsidizing your life," he sneered. "If you want to keep living under my roof, you need to start paying me $1,000 a month in rent. On top of that, you buy your own food and stop living off me like a parasite. From now on, it's 50-50ths, or you can pack your bags and get out. He expected me to beg. He expected me to cry and promise to give him the $1,000 a month he desperately wanted so he could buy his stupid golf clubs. Instead, I gave him nothing. I just nodded and walked away. Once I was in the bedroom, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank spreadsheet. If David wanted a strictly transactional roommate relationship, he was going to get the premium package. I spent the next 3 hours calculating exactly how much I had been contributing to his household. I printed out the utility bills, the grocery receipts, the furniture receipts, and the streaming service invoices. The next morning, before he left for work, I walked into the living room and handed him a legally binding-looking document that I had drafted. I called it the Roommate Cohabitation Agreement. David looked at the paper, then looked at me with a smug, self-satisfied grin. "So, you realized I was right," he chuckled. "I realized that you want a strictly 50-50ths roommate dynamic," I said, my voice completely void of emotion. "And I agree. It's the most fair way forward. Here is the $1,000 for this month's rent, transferred to your account this morning. In exchange, this contract outlines our new living arrangements, based entirely on your rules. Sign it." He didn't even read it fully. His eyes just lit up at the $1,000 notification on his phone, and he scribbled his signature at the bottom. "Glad you finally came to your senses," he said, grabbing his briefcase. "Oh, David?" I called out just as his hand hit the doorknob. "Since we are now strictly roommates and buying our own food, I won't be cooking dinner tonight. Or ever again. Have a good day at work." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but his ego quickly covered it up. "Whatever. I can buy my own steaks," he scoffed, and slammed the door. Step 1 of my malicious compliance had officially begun. That afternoon, while David was at the office, I went to work. First, I called the electric, water, and gas companies. Since the house was in his name, but the utilities were in mine, I requested an immediate transfer of service. Effective at midnight, the accounts were closed in my name and reverted to the homeowner. They would be sending him the new deposits and bills directly. Next, I changed the passwords to every single streaming service and logged out all devices associated with the living room TV and his personal iPad. I called the internet service provider and downgraded the house's main router to the absolute cheapest, slowest tier available, just enough for basic web browsing. Then, I bought a secondary, high-speed, secure mobile hotspot exclusively for my home office, paid for by my business. Finally, I went to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty combination padlock. I cleared out exactly half of the refrigerator and half of the pantry. I moved all the premium ingredients, the good olive oil, the organic vegetables, the nice cheeses, and the meal-prepped lunches I had made on Sunday into my designated half. Then, I installed a lockable mini fridge in my home office for my most expensive items. When David came home that evening, the reality of his new rules began to set in immediately. He walked into the kitchen, expecting the smell of roasted chicken or garlic butter steak. Instead, the kitchen was dark, clean, and silent. I was sitting at the dining table, eating a beautifully seared salmon fillet with a side of asparagus, scrolling through my phone. "Where's dinner?" he asked, dropping his keys on the counter. "I bought my own food, just like you asked," I replied without looking up. "I assume you bought yours on the way home?" He scowled, marched over to the fridge, and pulled it open. He stared at the painfully empty shelves on his designated side. The only things left on his side were a half-empty bottle of ketchup, some expired mustard, and a single can of generic brand soda. "Are you kidding me right now?" he demanded. "You took all the food?" "I took the food I paid for," I corrected him. "As per Section 2, Paragraph A of our signed roommate agreement, we are responsible for our own groceries. You told me to stop living off you. I'm just respecting your boundaries, David." He slammed the fridge shut, grabbed his keys, and stormed out to get fast food. He came back an hour later with a greasy burger, looking utterly defeated. He slumped onto the couch and turned on the TV to watch his favorite show on Netflix. A moment later, I heard him yelling from the living room, "Hey, why is Netflix asking for a password? And why is the Wi-Fi practically crawling?"
I walked out of my office, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Well, roommate, those accounts are in my name and tied to my credit card. Since we are no longer subsidizing each other's lives, I assumed you'd want to set up your own accounts. As for the internet, I downgraded the main house line, since I no longer want to pay premium prices for bandwidth you use for gaming. I have my own private network for work now." His face turned a shade of crimson I had never seen before. "You're being entirely unreasonable and petty," he shouted. "I'm paying $1,000 to live in a room in your house," I replied coldly. "I owe you nothing else. Buy your own internet." I turned around, walked into my office, and locked the door. For the first 2 weeks, it was absolute chaos for him. David quickly realized he had absolutely no idea how to run a household. His laundry started piling up in the corner of our bedroom. I had separated our hampers, of course. He tried to sneak a pair of his slacks into my laundry load, and I simply picked them out with 2 fingers and dropped them back on his side of the room. He ended up having to buy new underwear because he was too stubborn to figure out how to use the washing machine on the delicate cycle. His diet deteriorated rapidly because he refused to learn how to cook, and because his beloved expensive steaks were locked safely in my mini fridge. He survived almost entirely on DoorDash and frozen microwave dinners. The irony was beautiful. In his attempt to save money by extorting $1,000 from me, he was blowing nearly $800 a month just on takeout food. But the real breaking point for his pride happened during week 3. David's mother, a woman who always thought her son hung the moon and the stars, came over unannounced for Sunday dinner. Usually when she visited, I would spend hours cooking a lavish roast or a handmade pasta dish to impress her. This Sunday, I was sitting on the patio, enjoying a glass of wine and a charcuterie board I had made for myself. David was frantically rummaging through the kitchen when his mother walked in. "Oh, it smells." "Well, it doesn't smell like anything," his mother said, looking confused. "Where is the roast, dear?" she asked, looking at me through the patio door. Before I could answer, David tried to cover for himself. "Oh, Mom, she's just being lazy today. We'll probably just order pizzas." I didn't miss a beat. I stood up, walked inside, picked up the laminated roommate agreement I had left on the counter, and handed it to his mother. "Actually, Martha," I said with a polite smile, "David implemented some new financial rules for the household. He felt I was a parasite living off his wealth. So he mandated that we strictly separate our food, chores, and finances. I pay him rent now. I'm technically his tenant, and tenants don't cook for their landlords." Tenants. Martha put on her reading glasses, scanned the document, and looked at her son in absolute horror. "David Michael, what is this nonsense? You made your wife sign a roommate contract? And you called her a parasite?" "Mom, she's twisting my words," he stammered, looking like a deer caught in the headlights. "She paid for everything in this kitchen," Martha snapped, gesturing to the appliances. "I know for a fact she bought that espresso machine you use every morning. Have you lost your mind?" David was humiliated, but instead of apologizing to me, his fragile ego caused him to double down. After his mother left in a huff, refusing to eat pizza, he screamed at me for embarrassing him. "You think this is funny?" he raged. "You think you're so smart? Fine. We'll play it this way forever. See how you like living like a stranger in my house?" "Oh, David," I thought to myself, "I'm not staying in your house." While David was busy drowning in takeout boxes and wrinkled laundry, I was making monumental moves behind the scenes. Remember that massive increase in my income? I hadn't inflated my lifestyle one bit. Over the past few years, and especially the last 6 months, I had saved an enormous amount of money. I quietly reached out to a phenomenal real estate agent and started touring properties during my lunch breaks. Within a month of our roommate agreement, I found the perfect place. A stunning, newly renovated 4-bedroom townhouse with a beautiful backyard, located in a much nicer, safer neighborhood about 30 minutes away. Because my credit was flawless and my income was heavily verified, I was pre-approved instantly. I put down a massive down payment and rushed the closing process. Simultaneously, I hired one of the most cutthroat divorce attorneys in the city. I handed her our prenuptial agreement. She reviewed it and smiled a predatory smile. "Your husband outsmarted himself," she told me. "Because he insisted on keeping the house separate, and because you have meticulously documented that your finances remain separate throughout the marriage, this is going to be one of the cleanest divorces I've ever processed. Furthermore, anything you purchased with your own separate funds, furniture, electronics, appliances, legally belongs to you. You can take it all." The timing for my grand exit couldn't have been more perfect. 2 weeks after I closed on my townhouse, David's highly anticipated golf trip to Miami finally arrived. He was going to be gone from Thursday morning until Sunday night. On Thursday morning, I watched him pack his bags. He was acting smug, assuming I was miserable living under his strict regime. "Make sure you don't use my body wash while I'm gone," he joked terribly as he zipped his suitcase. "Don't worry," I replied smoothly. "I won't be using anything of yours." The second his Uber pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the street, I sprang into action. I didn't just pack my bags. I orchestrated a tactical extraction. I had a team of professional movers waiting a block away. As soon as I gave them the green light, their massive truck backed into the driveway. I directed them with military precision. I had the receipts for everything I owned, and I took it all. They dismantled the $3,000 sectional sofa and loaded it onto the truck. They took down the 75-inch smart TV from the wall mount. They unhooked the surround sound system. They packed up the expensive dining room table, the guest room bed, all of my home office equipment, and the patio furniture. Then we moved to the kitchen. I took the $800 espresso machine. I took the KitchenAid stand mixer. I took the premium pots and pans, the good silverware, and every single plate that wasn't a paper plate. I even took the brand new LG washing machine and dryer, leaving the hookups bare. By Friday afternoon, David's house was an echoing hollow shell. The only things left were his bed, his cheap gaming desk, his clothes, and a single lawn chair in the living room. It looked like an abandoned foreclosure. Before I locked the door for the final time, I left two things on the kitchen counter: my wedding ring and a manila folder containing the divorce papers, fully drawn up and signed by me. Pinned to the top of the folder was the original roommate cohabitation agreement he had forced me to sign. I took a red Sharpie and wrote across the front, "Lease terminated. Find a new parasite." 1. I spent the weekend unpacking in my gorgeous new townhouse. I poured myself a glass of expensive champagne, ordered sushi, and watched my favorite movies on my massive TV. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Sunday evening rolled around. I knew David's flight landed at 6 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., my phone started vibrating off the table. I watched his name flash on the screen. I let it ring. He called 3 more times, back to back. Then, the text messages started flooding in like a tsunami. David, 7:32. What the hell is going on? Where is all the furniture? David, 7:33 p.m. Did we get robbed? Call me back now. David, 7:35 p. The washing machine is gone. What did you do? David, 7:40 p. I just saw the folder. Are you out of your f-ing mind? You can't just leave and take everything. David, 7:45. Please, pick up the phone. Please, let's talk about this. I'm sitting on a lawn chair in an empty house. I read the texts, savoring the absolute panic radiating through the screen. He was finally experiencing the consequences of his own arrogance. He wanted me to buy my own things and stop living off him. So I took exactly what I bought, and I left him with exactly what he provided. I typed out one final message. Me. I took your advice, David. I stopped living off you. The house is all yours, just like you always wanted. The divorce papers are self-explanatory. My lawyer will handle all further communication. Do not contact me again. I hit send, and then I blocked his number across every platform. The fallout over the next few months was glorious. David tried to fight the divorce, attempting to claim that I had stolen marital assets. But my lawyer brutally shut him down in the very first mediation session. She slid his precious prenuptial agreement across the table, along with a heavily indexed binder containing every single receipt for the furniture and appliances, proving they were purchased exclusively from my separate checking account. David's lawyer actually sighed out loud and told him he had no case. To make matters worse for him, without my $1,000 rent and without me covering all the utilities, streaming services, and groceries, David suddenly found himself drowning financially. He had blown his savings on his Miami trip and his stupid lifestyle, and he was now stuck paying $1,800 a month for an empty house that he couldn't afford to furnish. I heard through the grapevine, a mutual friend who totally took my side, that David had to take out a high-interest personal loan just to buy a used couch, a cheap TV, and a washer-dryer set off Facebook Marketplace. His mother refused to help him, still disgusted by how he had treated me. He was miserable, broke, and living in an echo chamber of his own making. As for me, I am thriving. My business is booming. I recently started dating a wonderful man who actually respects me as an equal partner, and my townhouse feels like a true sanctuary. I never have to pick up another man's dirty laundry, and I never have to justify my existence in my own home. David wanted me to learn how to survive without him, and I did. I just did it in a $600,000 townhouse, leaving him sitting on a lawn chair in an empty room, eating cold takeout. Sometimes, the best response to an insult isn't to scream or cry. Sometimes, the best response is absolute silence, followed by absolute destruction.